Please pause the video and take a moment to read this important safety message. Okay, next on the bench here we have the Hafler 110 preamp, and this is a mate to the DH-220 that we just finished restoring. So we're going to get these rack mount ears off. I probably won't reuse those, and let's get this unit opened up. All right, we're going to remove the 10 1/4-inch screws here from the bottom panel and the sides here. That's just a matter of sliding the top cover straight off the back of this unit. And as you can see in here, wow, there's not a lot to this unit. You got a little power transformer back here. You got your output boards in the back. You've got your actual preamp boards here. You got a fuse here. It's not a ton to it. It's going to be what I would think is a fairly simplistic recap job here. So when I take the rack mount ears off, apparently it originally had some covers here, and now when I put the cover back on it, it's missing those two little covers and it looks weird. So I'm going to have to leave the rack mount ears on this one, which may mean I go back and put the rack mount ears on the amplifier just to make them match up. I did go ahead and take this faceplate off. It'll help with cleaning the knobs and whatnot on the front end and being able to de-ox it in here good. Now if you'll notice, you got two ribbon cables that come up and connect to this back board here. And I am going to disconnect it because if you'll notice, there's a little bit of rust and corrosion on these, and they're recessed inside here, which is going to make it very hard to clean those without actually breaking this panel loose. So there's 8 screws here that'll hold this panel and drop it loose. Then I'll be able to unconnect these ribbon cables and clean that up really well. Okay, as you can see here, I got the board on the back here taken loose. Just those screws, it pops loose. There's a wire connected here, and I'm not going to unsolder it. I just needed enough here to work with it. I use a Dremel tool with a bristle brush on the end of it. It's a brass brush here, and I'll just crank it up, and we will slowly work our way around all these units and clean them up well. I won't drag you through all this, but you kind of get the idea, and get these things all cleaned up. And voila, we've got them all cleaned up and ready to go. Matter of fact, I can go ahead and mount these back in because there's nothing else we're actually going to do to these. Well, I don't know, maybe. There is a capacitor or two here, so I'm going to leave it loose just in case those are part of what gets replaced. Let's get going with the electrolytic recapping of this unit. Alright, as you guys know, I'm not a huge fan of capacitor kits usually because a lot of pieces of gear had different revisions of the board as they went along. So a good example might be something like a Marantz 2245 or something. There were multiple revisions of the board inside of it, so if you buy a kit online, it's probably 98% correct, but there may be a few components that you don't have because the board changed a little bit. In this case, the guy that puts these kits together does a really good job. You can find these on eBay. Same guy I bought the boards for the 220 amplifier. So anyway, and he uses all high-grade Nikon Muse and audio-grade caps in this, so no low-grade. But here it just has like a quantity, 22 microfarad non-polarized radials for C6, 106, C16, 16, 116, 22, and 122. And what you do then is you basically use these two diagrams that it provides you here. One here on one channel and one for the other channel, just like that. And so you just kind of go through and mark them off as you do them on this paper. And the rest of it's just an exercise in mapping and soldering, and I'll show you a couple tricks around that. Okay, here's my first tip for you on recapping anything, and if you watched any of my videos before, you've probably seen this technique I use. I go through and orient the device itself towards me in a specific way that I'll know. In other words, the knobs are facing me sitting here on the bench. And what I do is I use a magic marker, and I mark each and every capacitor with a little tick on it, as you can see, facing me, right? You can see here on these little bitty ticks on every one of them on my side. Let me tell you why I do that. When I pull this capacitor out right here, and then let's say I get, my phone rings, I get distracted, my wife calls me, my dog jumps on me, whatever. Then later I'm sitting here holding this cap going, gosh, I don't remember which direction it went back in the unit. Well, the fact I put a little tick mark there and aimed it towards me, I'll know exactly how that cap goes back in. I'll be able to look at that and say, well, the tick's on this side, the stripe's on that side, so the negative goes over there, the positive goes here, and I'll put it back in there. And you may say, well, why do that? A lot of manufacturers will mark their boards with plus and minus signs. So why do you go to the effort of marketing? Well, I will tell you, through 30 plus years of experience doing this, a lot of board markings are wrong. I can name countless issues on Marantz and Sansui units where the screen printing that they did to mark was not done by the engineers. It was done by a later group of people that were kind of putting the boards to fabrication, and they got it wrong sometimes. And so you would end up with this capacitor in backwards and ultimately have a problem with the unit. It'd be hard as heck when you're dealing with a whole bunch of stuff to figure out which one caused the problem. If I put these tick marks all towards me, I pull this out, I know exactly how that came out of the board. Regardless of what's marked on the board, I'll know how to put the new one back exactly. So I go through and put one little black mark on the front side of all these facing me, and then we'll use some other color coordinating here in a minute for something else. One more thing to note, there's an electrolytic underneath of this board, and the only way to get to it, you remove these top two screws right here, and then this top little daughter board here will unplug from the bottom one, and then you can get to that capacitor. And you can see it down in here with the little daughter board pulled off. Don't forget, there's 4 on the bottom side of this daughter board as well, so I'm going to do the same thing, kind of facing me. Just put my 4 little tick marks on the side facing me there. Okay, as you can see here, there's a good bit of mylar capacitors, blah, 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 blah. Okay, as you can see here, there's a good bit of polypropylene or polyester capacitors right here, and then you got your electrolytics here. You know, I thought about doing it the way the book, the book kind of breaks everything down into there's these, and there's here, and here. I think I'm going to go about it a different way. I think I'm going to work left to right or right to left on the board. And as I pull one out, I'll look it up on here, see what value they're telling me to put in it, and then I'll put it in that spot. That way I can just kind of work my way across the board in a uniform fashion. But you can kind of go about this any way you want. It will warn you here that many electrolytics are polarized. Make sure they're installed correctly. We already talked about that a little bit. But there are a few here that are non-polarized, so you can put them in any direction you want to. Okay, the way I'm going to go about this, I'm going to flip this unit up on its side all the way over here. And then I've got the Heiko FR300 solder removing tool, and I'm going to come in here and just it's kind of hard for you guys to see what I'm doing here, but you hold it on there, you get it hot, and you remove the solder. Once you get that done, you just start wiggling the capacitor until out it comes. It's that simple with the desoldering tool here. Sometimes these will have a little glue holding them onto the board, but for the most part, they just pop right out, and it's really simple. So I'll leave it up to you. If you want to use a regular soldering iron, what you do is you heat one side, work it a little bit, heat the other side, work it a little bit, heat the other side, work it a little bit, kind of back and forth till you get the capacitor out. But then you still got some solder on the board, and you'll end up using some solder wick or a solder sucker. I use my little solder sucker right here all the time. You just kind of push it down and then release it, and it sucks the solder up in the end. Then you push it back down to eject the solder out. Either way works fine. I'm going to go with the solder desoldering gun, but this really isn't a lesson in soldering. It's about how to go about recapping and restoring this unit. So now, as you can see here, let me change my zoom just a little bit here. Okay, now that I've pulled it out, I know exactly which direction the stripe's going to go, because all I got to do is put that little tick towards me. So the negative terminal is going to be over here, and this is a 50 volt at 100 microfarad, right? And if I come look on the board over here, I would know that this is C32, and then I would just come back over here on this unit, right? And I would find C32. There are two 1000 microfarad at 50 volts, so they went back with the same values at 50 for C32 and C33. So then we just have to come in here, and my guess is it's the biggest ones here. Oh, that's 1000 microfarad at 10 volt. That's not going to be it. Let's see here. we've got to find the 1000 microfarad at 50 volts. Right there. Two of these Nikon here. 1000 microfarad, 50 volts. And we'll just take now, remember, I know which way that was pointed. I know the stripe goes, let's see, stripe goes off to the right here. So I've got my two new leads. Now that I use the desoldering gun, it's a matter of put this capacitor back down in here, push it all the way down, maybe bend the leads a little bit on the other side, and you can see here we'll use a regular soldering gun and a little bit of solder here, and we'll just tack this new one in. Make sure you leave it on there long enough for it to soak in good and pull onto both the little lead and the board itself. And then it's a matter of, and you use whatever kind of snips you've got. I've just got a pair of angle pliers here. You snap those two ends off, and we have replaced a capacitor in this unit. Now, another little trick I use, once I've replaced a capacitor, I come put a little red dot or a little red mark on it or something. That way I know this one has been recapped, and it's easy for me to tell which ones have and haven't as I work my way through the board. I'm not going to bore you with every one of these, so we'll just keep moving along. Okay, the next one I just got to right here, it is C36, and it's a 22 microfarad at 50 volts, but it has a stripe on the back of it facing the back direction. Okay, so it's a polarized capacitor. You gotta be careful. In this kit, there are quite a few, I think there's 6 of them here, 22 at 50 microfarads BP. These have no stripe on them. They're non-polarized, so don't put that one in that place. Instead, there's 3 22 microfarad at 50 volts, and if you'll notice, the non-polarized ones much smaller than the polarized ones here. But these will be the ones the ones with the stripe, the ones that are polarized that you'll use to replace the polarized cap. As you can see, as I get them replaced, the little red dot, I'm also on my piece of paper over here kind of marking them off. So as I work my way, I know exactly where I'm at the whole way through, and I don't have to guess as I look back. Okay, I just took out C39, which is right up here on the front of the board, and it's a 4.7 microfarad at 25 volts. And as I look in the instructions here, it'll tell you C39 is a 4.7 at 25 volts. But as I go through the capacitors, what I find is a 4.7 at 35 volts, and there are no 4.7 at 25 volts. That's okay. Anytime you go larger with the voltage, you're fine. You're not really changing the value of the capacitor or how it plays in the circuit. You're just saying this capacitor could handle more voltage than a 25 volt capacitor could. And as long as, what happens is as you increase the voltage rating on a capacitor, the capacitor gets larger and larger and larger. So as long as this capacitor doesn't get too big to fit in the circuit where you need it, you're good to go. So the difference between 25 volt and 35 volt, no difference. Just make sure you get it plugged in right. But sometimes you know, when the manufacturer or whoever's putting these kits together is trying to replace capacitors and they order them, you know, they might have been out of 25 volts, so they just ordered 35 volts. Or maybe the 35 volts were less expensive that day, and that's why we've got these. So just pay attention to things like that. Also, remember, this is a non-polarized, so it doesn't matter which direction you put it into the board. Okay, back to my point I made earlier about why I don't like buying capacitor kits on eBay. Just pulled out a 470 microfarad at 25 volts out of this little slot right here. Nowhere in this kit does it have 470 microfarad capacitor. So there again, to my point, sometimes these boards change, sometimes the component values may be different and slightly different variations of the board. I'm going to have to go now over to my bin and get one of these out. Luckily, I've got these in stock. If you had been at home and ordered this kit, you'd be paused right now because you'd be going online to somewhere and ordering you some 470 microfarad capacitors, waiting a week to get them and replace it. Or you would be putting this one back in there and then you've only got a partial recap. So I think my point was made about why I don't like parts kits off of eBay. The alternative, though, might be just as bad, okay? If you don't have a kit like this, then you're just going to have to go through and write up your own list, and then you're going to have to go to DigiKey, Mauser, somewhere like that. And you're just going to have to order all of these values at one time. And what you don't want to do, don't do this. Do not get the service manual or schematic online for this amp and go to the section with capacitors and look up all the capacitors and order those, because that might be how this kit got built, and that little list may have overlooked that or had a different value there for that. Sometimes the service manuals are what's wrong. If you're going to make a kit, go through the amp, read each one. When you get done, make your own list and then order them that way. Fortunately, in my stash, I had a little selection here. It looks like these are Panasonic caps, but I had some 470 at 35 volts. Otherwise, I'd be ordering something. All right, I just rolled up across this little section here with 3 close together, and as I flipped it over, I'm looking at the leads for all these, and I'm thinking, wow, I can just unsolder all 3 of those at once. Problem is, when you pull them out, you don't know which cap was where. And it's easy to get lost. Stick with one at a time, no matter what you do. You know what's crazy? Yet another 25 at 470 volts. I'm going to write the guy that puts these kits together and say, hey, your kit completely omits the 470 microfarad capacitor. And there again, glad I had a little bag of them. I think this one's going to be the same, and maybe a few others here. We'll see. Sure enough, right here, another 47 at 25 volts. So I'm going to burn up my whole bag of, 470. I'm going to burn up my whole bag here. I'm going to get off my high horse about this. Not that any of these other caps I've replaced haven't been leaky or aged, but I did find one that's actually leaking out of the bottom here and bulged a little bit. So definitely glad I did this recap. That one was definitely causing some issues. Like I said, not that the others haven't lost some value or maybe weak or whatnot, but that one definitely leaky. I will tell you, on this daughter board I cheated a little bit, because I noticed that it was a 47, a 47 microfarad, both non-polarized, and a 4.7 in the middle. So I pulled all 4 of them since none of them were polarized, and I knew the 2 4.7s went in the middle and the 2 47s went on the outside. And then I put all these in, and then I'm going to solder them all at once. The reason being on this one, it's kind of tough to pull these little ones out here in the middle. This is a tight little crowded, crammed in group of capacitors here, but kind of knew what I was doing and paid attention, and we'll be fine. Okay, and the very final electrolytic is right back up under here, so you can't really get a solder gun down on it. So I just kind of had to do old school style and heat it up, pull the cap out from the other side, push it back in while I was trying to heat both of these up a little bit, and then finally got it through there and got it soldered in. So a little more tricky, but nothing crazy there. And that completes all the electrolytics now across this board. Just need to mark this one off here as complete. And now it's time to move on to replacing coupling caps and whatnot with these polyester caps or polypropylene, whichever one they are. As you can see now, it's kind of light, but it's in purple here. I've marked out the ones that I've completed. And by the way, this asterisk right here, I finally figured out what the individual did that built this kit. At the end of it, we ended up with 3, 6, 7, 8, 220 microfarads at looks like these are at 35 volts, and what we had replaced were 8 470, and these would not be a good replacement for that. I would not pull a 470 out and put a 220 in. So it's possible that this board had some revisions to it along the way, and maybe at one point these were 220 microfarads, and a later revision they're 470, as I mentioned before. So at any rate, I've got a nice little stash now of 220 grade audio caps. I replaced 470s, and I burned through my bag of 470s, so I'll need to replace those. But onward now to same thing here. These things are typically marked. Usually don't have the values on them, like this one here. will have 473J on it, right, which is really a 0.047 microfarad. And if you need to look it up, all you got to do is look up capacitor number values, and it'll give you a nice little chart online. I'm really confused now at this point. All the values that this kit lists here, and this is DH-110 PC14 capacitor kit, okay? All the values it lists here and here, and the capacitors to be replaced are nowhere to be found on my board here. It's quite interesting. I'm wondering whether maybe I see a lot of plugins here for daughter boards. I'm not an expert at this Hafler gear, and I see another plug-in here. Maybe there are some daughter boards in some scenarios, but there's really no capacitors to be replaced that match up with any of these, nor the numbers on any of my schematics. And what's weird is it says PC14 capacitor kit. If I flip this over, it's a DH-110 PC14. Now, one thing odd I noticed, there's a couple capacitors on this unit, and if you look at this little board, mine says, where's it at here? PC12. And if you come over here and look at some of the capacitors they're pointing out to replace, it shows PC13 down here. So, you know, my main goal was to replace the electrolytics, and that's what I've done at this point. I do have these two big capacitors right here, but honestly, I'm not replacing those. There's nothing wrong with those caps. I'm going to leave it as is, and there again, back to my I don't like to buy kits. I'd rather mark out everything I need, order it, get the parts, put it in here. Because sometimes with kits, you end up with some stuff that doesn't match up with your boards and whatnot. So, at any rate, with that, we're going to put this unit back in service and see how it sounds. And I put the little daughter board back in play right here on the front, and use a little bit of deoxit on both on all these switches right here. Up next, just using a little deoxit D5 in each of these potentiometers, hit them from a couple different angles, and twist the heck out of them once you get this stuff down inside of them, and just kind of clean up any dirty controls that you might have here on these units. You get the idea. I'm going to clean them all. For whatever it's worth to the people at Deoxit, if you're watching this video, this little thing you've invented here is the most horrible invention ever. You waste so much of this product because it ends up leaking out back here at this joint versus actually getting into the product that you want. I'm going to make a video on that topic specifically for whatever that's worth. All right, just putting it back together now. Slid the top cover on, the 4 screws. Now we've got the 6 here that hold the bottom screws on it. I am going to mark in here that when I restored this, I always put a sticker or label just so we'll know in the future if somebody ever opens this up. All right, I got things a little out of order as always, going too fast here. Put the ears back on the front. Then put the top cover on. There you go. Once you get that on, then it's as simple as getting it locked in. Alright, she's back together, and there's what we replaced. Quite a few caps, and I'm going to hook up the 220 I had restored that was kind of a parallel deal with this, and let's see how the two of them sounds together. Alright, as you can see, we've got them all back together here. Hate doing this, but I have to play royalty-free music these days, otherwise my videos get demonetized. But everything's working well. Balance, treble. You can hear it's a lot flatter there. Take away the bass. Bottom line is this unit sounds great. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed this series. I'm going to cover this little hole up. It did have a red plug here and this one, and I don't think that was from the factory because somebody drilled these holes out and put a light there. But anyway, you've got an indicator light here, so I'm just going to put a black hole over it right here. Cover. I've ordered some, just don't have them in stock yet. But anyway, we're going to call this a wrap. You know, had fun It was fun doing this series. Had a lot of fun doing this. Learned some more things about using capacitor kits here, as well as I gave you a spin-off video here to deoxit about the mess that these new cans cause. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll be back soon, hopefully this summer. Still working a lot in the barn, and this was part of getting the barn up and going. Also traveling a lot for work right now, but should calm down this fall, and I'll see you guys again. Thanks, everyone.